You won't be lonely anymore. You have a new friend.
M. Night Shyamalan's unexpected comic book epic introducing us to Elijah Price, David Dunn, and Kevin Wendell Crumb comes to a head with Glass coming out this month. So here are 7 things you didn't know about Unbreakable and Split. Probably.
Do you see any Teletubbies in here?
Samuel L. Jackson is no stranger to playing outrageous-looking and sounding characters. Coming off characters like Julius, Reverend Fred Sultan, and Ordell Robbie, getting into Elijah's shoes was a walk in the park. In fact, Jackson provided the most input and suggestions to Elijah's overall look. When coming up for the color motif for Elijah, Jackson suggested the color purple because he saw him as a very regal man, and purple is the color of royalty. He also suggested the cane be made out of glass as a metaphor for the very literal condition that Elijah has with his osteogenesis imperfecta. Both Shyamalan and Jackson thought of something big and similar to abolitionist Frederick Douglass's hair for Elijah, but is it a coincidence or a nod that Mr. Glass's hair is modeled after a guy with glass in his name? Nah, it's totally a coincidence. That'd be the dumbest reason ever to pick Frederick Douglass's hair. Moving on.
I'll show you.
The kitchen gun scene in which Joseph attempts to prove that David is as unbreakable as Elijah says is based off a story about Superman. Well, a story about a man who played the Man of Steel in the 50s, George Reeves. During one of Superman's public appearances, a young child with a loaded gun came up to Reeves and asked if they could shoot him because he wanted to see a bullet ricochet off of Superman. Reeves managed to talk the impressionable kid out of the dangerous request by reasoning that someone else could get hit with the stray bullet, avoiding his brush with death that day. But staying in character like that in the face of almost certain death is pretty impressive. I don't know that Henry Cavill would do that. There is no doubt that James McAvoy gives a remarkable, varied performance as Kevin Wendell Crumb in his 24 personas.
I know.
On top of being mentally and emotionally taxing, these roles pushed McAvoy physically as well. For instance, this scene where each persona is fighting for the light was frustrating for McAvoy to film because he wasn't quite nailing it. He punched a nearby door thinking it was fake, but unfortunately, like any time you punch a door, it wasn't fake and he broke his hand. He didn't tell anyone about the injury, so when they filmed this scene 2 days later, you can see that he has a swollen hand. Don't worry, he eventually got a cast, and you can even see it in Atomic Blonde, which he filmed right after Split. But the most physically taxing character of all, McAvoy says it was Patricia, simply because of the heels. Am I right, ladies?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, don't put that in there, that's gross.
He's not well.
Come on, just move on. Jackson has stated in interviews that he owes his involvement in Unbreakable to Bruce Willis. According to Jackson, after filming Rules of Engagement in Morocco, he spent an extra week relaxing, as one does, and ran into Willis at a casino. Willis had just finished filming The Sixth Sense and told Jackson about the next project Shyamalan was working on. Shyamalan had written Unbreakable while on The Sixth Sense and had written it with Willis and Jackson in mind. And the lesson here is, Hollywood is mostly based around things that happen accidentally in casinos on a different continent. If we were to place Elijah, David Dunn, and Kevin into a group of superheroes, they would probably fit best with the X-Men. Born into extraordinary and disorderly circumstances, they all live with the consequences of what life has dealt them. James McAvoy, of course, plays Professor Charles Xavier, whose son in the comics, David Haller, aka Legion, has dissociative identity disorder just like Kevin. Coincidentally, the show Legion premiered in 2017, the same year that Split came out in theaters. And now, I just want the whole thing to come full circle and get Dan Stevens, who plays Legion, as well as the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, to do some kind of cameo as the Beast in Split. Yeah, it'd be dumb, but a guy can dream. Especially a dumb guy. Speaking of comic book movies, Disney, who distributed Unbreakable, didn't want to market it as a superhero movie. Remember that this was the year 2000. Disney told Shyamalan that comic book movies were extremely niche and alienating, appealing only to those who went to conventions. But look at them now. What a bunch of hypocrites. Obviously, now Disney understands that superhero movies appeal to a much larger audience, owning Marvel and making $1 bazillion every year while claiming they knew it all along. I've got nothing to back that last part up with, though. Sounds a little bitter, but whatever. Just moving on. And one more thing about Marvel, long before Samuel L. Jackson personally took on the role as the assembler of Avengers, the Jackson version of Fury was running S.H.I.E.L.D. in the comics since 2001. Writer Mark Millar and artist Brian Hitch redesigned Nick Fury in the image of Jackson without Jackson's permission for Marvel's Ultimate imprint. Jackson, however, is a comic book fan and noticed his likeness mingling with the Avengers, and he called Marvel asking for the part in any movie they might be doing with the character. Lucky for him, they had a few plans, and the rest is history. It's hard to imagine that Jackson could have been mad at Millar for using his face for Fury all those years ago, but according to Millar, who met Jackson on the set of Kingsman, he said, "No, man, thanks for the 9-picture deal," making it the best bad motherfucker origin story of all time.
Want to see my lease?
That's all we have for this episode of Things You Didn't Know, but let us know in the comments if you're excited to see Glass, and subscribe to CineFix for more true-ish things about movies, and sometimes pulling a gun on Superman, right here on Things You Didn't Know.